How is it going, everybody? This is Sean Barnes. I want to welcome you to episode 58 of The Way of the Wolf. Our guest today is a gentleman named Bruce Dory. Our paths crossed about a year or so ago online. We had some conversations, we had some video chats and some emails back and forth, and I ended up buying his book, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But Bruce has been quite an inspiration to me, and I thought it would be hugely beneficial for us to bring him on the show, share a little bit about his story, who he is, and what he does. So, Bruce, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here, Sean.
One of the things I like to open with is just, who is Bruce Dory? Can you share a little bit about yourself so that the guests all better understand who you are?
In many ways, I'm happy to, and in some ways, it's what I, it's my story. So I guess the way to start is I'm an engineer, right out of engineering school. I grew up in Toronto, so right out of engineering school, I took a job in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia. It was warm. I was selling air conditioning. It seemed like a logical idea, and that was back in the 80s. So, really nobody wanted to go, and I was, kind of a loner. That really appealed to me, being a loner, and probably a way I thought I could make a lot of money. And so I did that. I was in Saudi for 7 years. Then I moved to Houston. So, as you know, I lived in Houston for 7 or 8 years. And I moved to Houston to basically do some consulting. I wanted to get into the real estate business, so I did. I moved into the medical center, museum district, and I started buying apartments, old apartments, fixing them up. Really did well. I thought I enjoyed it. And about 8 years later, I just got I got sort of beat down by litigation lawyers. Honestly, I had one too many people trip and fall, and I'm like, I don't want to do this. And it was at a kind of a challenging time where I was just going to get married, and I really loved business. So I did an MBA, and I just wanted to get into consulting. So I started consulting, and then, let's see, I did consulting, and I was a transformational consultant. So I got really, really interested in transformation, organizational transformation, the kind of stuff Werner Erhard was doing way back when. And I loved it. As a consultant, I didn't really love it. It wasn't delivering what I thought it would deliver. So I kind of left and semi-retired, sold some of my real estate in Texas, moved to Paris, France for 4 years. Thought I could retire for the rest of my life in Paris, France, living in the 7th arrondissement, which is a beautiful part of the city, right in the left bank. And the stock market tanked. That was 2000, so everything tanked. So I had to go back to work. So I went to Dubai with another air conditioning company, and I was in Dubai for about 10 years, about 8 years in Dubai, and then 2 years back in the United States as an executive, a senior vice president with a big air conditioning company. And toward the end of that period of time, I got decreasingly interested in being part of the corporate world and increasingly interested in coaching. Because I shared in my book, I had kind of I don't know how you say it in an easy way to say it, but I had kind of a meltdown, a breakdown. I was just turning 50. I was living in Dubai, so that was cool. I liked living in Dubai. But I was really sort of reassessing life, and I was not feeling very good. I was sort of struggling. I was not really enjoying my work. And the thing that got me through was I would spend time with my team. I'd do one-on-one coaching. And it was the thing that allowed me some connection and a way to feel sort of a self-confidence that I'd really accomplished something in my life and my career that I could pass on. And then when I moved back to the States, I moved from Dubai to Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is a pretty heavy transition, hot to cold. And because of that, and I don't know if it's because of that, but I had a second back surgery. So I had back surgery years ago, and in Dubai it was really fantastic. It's so hot, it's so humid. For some reason, my body was really pliable, and it felt great. I moved back to Minnesota, and everything tightened up, and I blew what's called a fusion. I had an L3-4 fusion, a mechanical fusion, blew it out, and then I was in the hospital for months, and it was really, really hard transitioning to try to get out of the hospital and get back to work, and pain meds and dealing with all of that stuff. And then I decided, I'm just going to leave the corporate world, and started and basically wrote my book. So that was kind of my way to just heal and get over what was a really challenging chapter. So I moved to a place that I loved. I didn't know anybody here. I'm in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I moved here and wrote my book. And now, 8 years later, I'm coaching and consulting and doing all kinds of stuff. So,
man, I love that story. It's so powerful to hear. Kind of you've been almost all over the world and worked for some big corporations, had very senior level executive roles that you've held. And what I find interesting about your story is the fact that you've kind of got to that point where some would argue you reached the pinnacle in terms of executive management. And then you realize that the politics that come along with being in a large corporation, and actually you didn't say politics, but you said the corporate life, I think. Yeah. And it is very challenging to navigate through. I think some people are successful in navigating through the challenges of very large corporations. Yeah. But one of the things that I found in my career, and I've never worked for corporations as large as you have, but there's an element of politics, especially at publicly traded corporations, that makes it increasingly difficult to affect change and to move the needle significantly. It just feels like there's so much red tape. Oh. And you mentioned your book. So for those of you watching or listening, the name of Bruce's book is Lift, The Nature and Craft of Coaching. Now, Bruce, this is an incredible book. Is this your first book you've written? Okay. Yeah. So there's a lot of meat here. Tell me a little bit about what prompted you to create this book? And another question I have is, how long did it take to write you? I see a lot of colleagues and friends that have written books, and their first book is a fraction of the length of this. There's a lot of meat and really good stuff in this book. So tell me a little bit about it.
Well, thank you. Well, as a mechanical engineer, the phenomena of lift was really valuable to me. I mean, so back in the days where I was in, and I was attracted to transformational consultant, this concept that you could actually take on a way of being. So the idea, and this goes back to Epictetus and all the Stoics, but this way of, and I think now the way they recommend thinking. So they think about doing is really, there's virtue in doing. There's not necessarily virtue in thinking about doing. And part of what I got from transformation was that if you could take on a way of being or be a leader, and you in your mind, you would be this way, then as the old trope used to go, then your actions would follow, and you'd start behaving in that way, and you'd produce great results. And I found that just stopped working for me. That I kept planning, I'm going to go and be this, and then I'm going to go be a real estate tycoon in Houston. And when I got to be what I thought, I had a couple $1 million, and when I thought when I was there, I wasn't doing what I like to do. I was not happy. I was not healthy. I was not doing anything I enjoyed doing. Yes, I was being this kind of conceptual, success. But so going back to lift, the concept of lift is there's not too many forces in the universe, right? I mean, there's 4 basic forces in the universe. Lift is a natural force, so it's its own force, and there's not many of those. And lift is a sort of a consequential force. So lift does not exist in the wing of an airplane. There's no lift in the wing of an airplane. Lift exists while it's doing something. It has to be moving through, the air or water or some sort of fluid. As it moves, it generates lift. And I make the case that leadership is like that, and happiness is like that, and that, for example, leadership is the thing that I like to, because I think leadership is super important. But leadership doesn't exist inside someone's head. Leadership is not a concept. It's not a way of being. It's not just a way of being. Leadership is a way of behaving in an environment. And I don't want to sound like a know-it-all, but this is what I experienced, that when I sat down and spoke with people, I felt better. Like, I just physically felt better. And I was being more of a leader by talking and coaching. For me, it was like, I remember coming out of coaching sessions and I felt up, like a lift. I felt like, and they did too. I mean, I would go, I'd spend a month working and, traveling back and forth to the States and Dubai and Europe. Nobody thanked me. I'm an executive. I never walked out of a meeting like, "Oh, Bruce, thank you so much. That was a great meeting. You really kicked my ass." No. But one coaching session on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee with somebody, and they're like, "Hey, listen, thanks a lot. That was great. And that made my week." And I'm like, why wouldn't I do this? One of the things that happened to me when I was 50, and it sounds, I may be early for me, but I really realized it is going to be over soon. I think for me at 50, it's like, I'm not a kid anymore. This is not just, I can have more free days. This is like real, and I'm going to be gone pretty soon, or incapacitated, like my dad, who has Alzheimer's, and I don't want to go out that way. I want to live, enjoy it.
One of the things that stuck with me as you were sharing that, and I'm going to kind of go back to the success that you have been able to achieve in your life, and the realization that all the money and the titles and all of that stuff, it's all well and good, but that true fulfillment comes from helping others, from lifting others up. And so I'm admittedly kind of on a similar path. And I talk about on the show, or I have over the past year, my story and my journey, and how over the years, especially through my late 20s and early 30s, I was so focused and driven on achieving these goals and accomplishments. What salary can I get? What title can I get? And around my mid-30s, whenever I had the opportunity to step in and start leading human resources, it opened my eyes to this human element of what was going on. And I was given the opportunity to start helping and building and developing others. And that is my newfound passion. Yes, the titles and money are nice, but at the end of the day, it's helping others accomplish things and helping others achieve that success that has brought me true fulfillment over the years.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. And one of the things that I'm finding, and I think for me the cool part about the book was it was probably a catastrophic investment in time and energy. It took me 3 years to write it, but it was the most, I don't know, in some ways gratifying 3 years But is I have men and women who say to me and email me and say, listen, I never thought about using my 20 years experience as a coach. I didn't think my 20 years in the real estate business here in Charlottesville, I could use and help the next generation. And that's really the whole focus of my book, saying that, look, coaching this is not some new thing. This is what they did the turn of the century. I mean, I talk about Da Vinci in my book. Leonardo da Vinci, he had a coach. They just called it a different name, but it was essentially a coach, not just a mentor. It was somebody who actually taught him how to do stuff and told him he could do more and better, and coached him to the next level. And I think that's part of and again, I talk about this in my book, and I really like this concept from school. But Erik Erikson and who is it? There's another guy who did adult development theory. But Erik Erikson, his work really helped me because I didn't realize that for most people in your 50s and 60s, the way you think just changes. It just changes. And the things that I valued in my 30s and 40s, like what car I was going to drive, what house I was going to live in, what neighborhood, all this bullshit that you realize at the end of the day, everybody else is, struggling and trying not to look like they're struggling. And doesn't matter if you're miserable. But Erikson says, look, when you're in your 50s to 60s, there are just certain things that become really important. And one of them is this idea of legacy and leaving some experience for yourself that you did something, you helped somebody, made a difference. And that really helped me because it really kind of like validated my desire to start coaching and writing about coaching and stuff like that. And empowering people. I think this is like the big thing for me now because I'm getting a lot of interest in this. Empowering people that have got 20 and 30 years to say, you are going to be an awesome coach. There's nobody better than you at coaching in this and, this specific thing, whatever that is, HR or whatever.
Yeah. So what do you think creates that situation where people, maybe they have 20 or 30 years of expertise in some sort of functional domain? What do you think causes that hesitation to go out and start helping people? Because I've come across many people that are experts in their field, extremely knowledgeable, but it never even crosses their mind of the thought of the value that they could bring to somebody in a similar field that's at a much earlier stage in their career. So I guess the question is, what do you think prompts that hesitation, and what have those conversations looked like for you and your clients as they unfold and you try to help them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought about that a lot. And it's, there's a great metaphor of crossing a river. It's a big river. Like you look at it, it's kind of like, how would I do it? It took me 20 years. I think, first of all, let me back up. There's two factors. And one of the factors is the grass is always greener. So I should do something else. A lot of people, I talk to a lot of people that got 25 years experience. And, I got a guy who's like I have a friend we're working together and he's in the nuclear business. 25 years experience in the nuclear business. He's got a PhD and he's talking about doing, online marketing of products. I'm like, are you crazy? And he said, oh no, I watched this video on YouTube and this guy's making $60,000 a month selling, tweezers on YouTube. I'm like, I know there's those videos, but I think there's that. I think there's you work so hard and then, oh my God, there's an easier way. There's a faster way. There's a simple fix. It's called the internet, YouTube, whatever. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is it's like, how do you do it? And that's where this metaphor of if you can just help people put the next rock in the water, like just step on that rock right there. That's the one. Get to that one. And then when you're there, you got to, let's find the next one and the next place to stand and help people move through in little bits, because, you know, for many of them, that whole body of work is so huge, they don't know where to start. And the place that I go, Sean, often is to say, look, you know, what would be what would be your ideal cup of coffee conversation with somebody? And they're like, oh, I would love to talk about, you know, the new nuclear regulatory stuff, you know, because we did it 20 years ago this way and blah, blah, blah. And I mean, you talk about what you know, you talk about what you like and what you know, and then you add the flair, you add that sort of nuance of coaching and the idea of limiting beliefs and all of those things into that, what you already know. And it's really cool, because you're now bringing new value to something that you just feel so rock solid confident in.
Well, and so that's a really good point that I want to actually dive into that a little bit deeper. So in the book, you talk a lot about how coming in and coaching, but coaching in an area that you are intimately familiar with, or you spent 20, 30 years in your career and trying to help people out and help them better understand, okay, what your experience has been in this domain, whether it's working with nuclear energy or, you know, whatever. That for me,
construction industry and heavy industry is my thing. So yeah.
Exactly. So you've got your thing, I've got mine, which is kind of IT is always near and dear to my heart. While I lead these other functional domains, IT is always going to have a soft spot in my heart, and I get excited talking about it. And so to your point, when you get two people together and they go grab a cup of coffee, you have that passion and that fire that ignites in that conversation, and the knowledge transfer both ways is just, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just very, very helpful. Now, I think that the question that I have for you at this point is really, when you talk about your coaching in these domains that you're familiar with, talk me through where your head is at as it pertains to the difference of me coming in and coaching on technology versus somebody just trying to be a leadership coach overall and just saying, hey, I do leadership coaching, as opposed to being a mentor and leadership coach in a domain that I've got 20 years of experience.
It is a great question that I've thought about a lot, and my experience tells me that I mean, you could sort of use simple examples, right? So I was in the construction, air conditioning, heavy manufacturing industry in the Middle East. So if somebody is in any of those, you know, that's sort of a broad category. But if somebody's in heavy industry and they want to get coaching, I feel pretty comfortable with that. I feel pretty comfortable understanding the language, getting up to speed. On the other side, the woman in my life who is in, you know, makeup and fashion and all things sort of makeup, I am not comfortable in that world. I do not understand that world. I would be a terrible, and I am a terrible, I'm told all the time, I am a terrible coach in that domain. I don't know, like you could say, well, it's just alignment and it's just accountability. No, it's not, because alignment there is so different. And I use an example, like one of the examples I use is that in the air conditioning business, there are certain periods of time in the year before the cooling season and then before the heating season. So right at, you know, springtime, mid-springtime, the guys in the factory and the guy are crazy. They're ordering stuff. They're just beside themselves. They're always late. So that we used to have coaches and Dyken and McQuay, and they would in my team, and they would say, you know, Bruce, this guy's having a problem with this guy, and we brought in a coach, and the leadership coach said that they need to have more sessions because it's the guy has an issue communicating, blah blah blah. And I would say, well, this is not a really good time of year to have those kinds of conversations anyway. In other words, the reason the guy was having the issue had nothing to do with the relationship. It had everything to do with the context. At that time of year, you don't want to haul a guy from manufacturing out of manufacturing, make him sit in the office for 3 hours and do coaching conversations and a psychological evaluation. It's just not... The context is all wrong. So if you don't understand the context, you can really screw it up. Now, I've seen great leadership coaches who can, move into different industries. I think they move from things like financial advisors through consultants and high-level consulting businesses very, very well. They don't need to understand insurance, but I think it's really context dependent. I really make that case that, and in the least case, you get up to speed really fast if you have the context. If you don't have the context and you don't know anything about eyeshadow or base or mascara or nail polish, you're really screwed. There's like a lot of... I used to think there's 3 colors and a couple of shades, and that was it, Like, it's a red one, it's a green one. No.
Well, and so that's a really good point. As I think through some of the people that I coach, I feel the most comfortable and confident whenever I'm working with technology executives, because I'm already up to speed. I know the challenges. I know, for the most part, the types of personality profiles of people that exist in the IT world. And so I can relate, I can talk the lingo, and I feel like I can add value much quicker whenever I'm working with a technology executive, as opposed to someone who's maybe on the operations side of things or something like that. So I think there's definitely something to that. And I see so many leadership development coaches, and that is their skill set. They're just a leadership coach that is very broad. And I've seen people that made entire careers out of leadership development. And one of the things that I found interesting is the things that they talk about and the things that I've discussed with them. It all kind of boils down to all of these tools that you can put in your leadership toolbox. And it's all kind of there's commonality between the language and the lingo and everything and the skills that they're teaching. But I've seen instances where they've never led more than maybe one person in their entire life. And so I find that interesting how some of them can come to the table and add value, and others, maybe you can say, oh, okay, well, I get where you're saying, but help me understand how to apply that knowledge. And that's where things start to break down a little bit, because maybe they haven't lived it or experienced it themselves. They've read everything through the textbooks, they understand, but being able to apply that knowledge can be challenging for somebody who doesn't have expertise in a given domain or field.
Yeah. I also, and talk about it in the book, there's like a subculture of leadership development that's, a lot of it was developed in the 60s, and it is just not real. Like, it's this whole concept that, if the whole idea of, and you'll, I hope you don't get, I'll probably get hate mail about this, but this whole idea that there is this law of attraction, that's a real thing, that, and I use science in the book, and I talk about that. There's no magnetic fields coming off of us. There's nothing we're not some big television, we're not an antenna. We're human beings. And yes, there's things that we communicate non-verbally, and all that, but one of the things, the reason I bring that up is because one of the things they talked about in the 60s was this idea that the access to becoming very good at something, the access to expertise was language. So that the concept was that if you really knew a language and you understood the language of leadership, for example, then you could become a good leader. And the example that they always use, and you may have heard this, or you read the books, you know this, or you may have read other books, but the example that was used for years was the example of the Eskimos, that they had 32 or 64 or 120 words for snow. And because they had so many words for snow and the distinctions for snow, they were really good at making, igloos and working in the snow. Now, the first thing, there's two things. One, if you just learn the language and then they drop you off in the Arctic, you're not going to be any good. That's pretty clear. That doesn't take a genius. But there's a couple of geniuses, and one of them's a guy named Steven Pinker, who is a linguist from Harvard. And he did the research because he was interested in that. He thought that was like a really cool concept he did the research years ago. And he found out there's about 10 words for snow in Eskimo as there is in English. So that is not a thing. That is not a thing that if you know the words or the distinctions, you get good. No, that's just the way to get good is to do it. Like to not be it, to do it. You physically do it and your body learns it and you learn it in the context. And the context is really important because you pick up all kinds of information from the context. So you'll learn that you do it 25 times at a certain temperature, and without making the notes, you learn that, okay, at this temperature, it behaves this way. And then at this temperature, it behaves this way. And then over time, you really learn something. It's the same in business, that you learn with employees or with cultures, and you really can help people learn if you understand that culture and you understand that context. You can help them see things they just can't see.
Yeah, there's so much truth in what you just described there. I've lived it and experienced it myself, and especially in recent years, trying to learn how to apply that knowledge and then impart it on people that are earlier on in their career. So I want to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. We could talk about this all day because it's so interesting to me. But it's really easy. I hate to say it that way, but it's easy, and it's easy. It happens to me too. But it's easy to get human beings to think that there is a simple way. I'll tell you a true story. 2 nights ago, I was late. I couldn't sleep. And and I know you're not supposed to do this, but I'm scrolling through, and Tony Robbins comes up, and he's got this course, right? And I think I own every Tony Robbins course. I bought them years ago, and then so he's selling one of his courses that I bought 20 years ago, and this was late at night, like 2 nights ago, and I'm like, I should buy that. I need that right now. I was like, wait a minute. I have that. I already own that. Why do I want to buy it? But the mind, just when you get a little bit tired too, you're like, oh, I need that. That will be really helpful. And people take advantage of that. Really smart marketers, advertise, they take advantage of that, and they sell you stuff you don't need. That's why most people buy books and tapes, and then they watch like the first little bit, and that's it. It's not. So it's just easy to trick us, and you got to be awake.
So that prompted something in me that I want to discuss a little bit more. So you said something to the effect of it's easy to think that there's a simple way of doing things. Yeah. And my philosophy recently in trying to coach others and help them out has been, hey, it's taken me almost 25 years to be able to learn all of the things that I've learned. I made so many mistakes along the way. And part of what inspires and motivates me is wanting to potentially help people compress that time down so that they can accomplish more in a shorter period of time. But as you were talking through that I had a little bit of a realization event that the things that I've learned have come because of time, because of the mistakes that I've made over the years and having to learn through them. Now, I think the only thing that I'm thinking about here is whenever I'm working with somebody who's maybe 10 years into their career, giving them a little bit of visibility and some almost street signs to say, hey, look out for this. And if you encounter this, maybe turn right or maybe turn left, so that whenever they do experience that challenge or issue, they have this thought of, oh, wait a second, I've talked about this before. And so instead of just blindly going off to the left, they can put just a little bit of thought into it and maybe make a better decision going forward. So I find that very interesting. And as you were sharing that's what was going through my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people will, at the right time in coaching, a lot of times coaching, you say the same things over and over, but they'll hear the right thing at the right time, and I just think that first of all, you can't really tell. There's a sort of argument that, well, coaches shouldn't tell people what to do, and that's not coaching, that's something else. But if you think about like coaching the way it was developed in sports and medicine and law and the arts, it's a combination of many things. I don't know why we would handicap someone and say, don't teach them. I mean, teaching is useful. But a good teacher will know you don't give them the answer. You don't say that the answer is 4. You help them get there by inference or by whatever way you to do it from having done it before. So I think I just think that one of the things that I talk about a lot and I use, and I think I mentioned to you that I have a video course that's coming out on coaching for people who are executives with 20 years experience, and this is where this goes against a lot of the coaching advice these days, but I recommend people share their experience. And you basically share, well, look, here's what happened to me, and you tell that story. And that, for me, often has made a bigger difference for when my coaches or my bosses would talk to me about something. Telling me to do something was one thing, but if they shared a story with me about, how I screwed this up or how I made this work, that was way more impactful. And so I really recommend when I'm coaching people to become coaches is to just be wide open and share your experiences, good and bad. And people really learn from real world experience, and they can sniff out nonsense and BS.
Yeah. For me, it's I have to echo that. And then I think that sharing my experiences allows them to better connect with me, because a lot of times I've found that people have had similar experiences and they can relate to what I'm saying. I found that to be hugely beneficial and allowing me to better connect with those individuals and kind of break down those walls that sometimes exist in coaching. So, all right, so we've gone way down that rabbit hole. So much good information. I love this conversation. I want to pivot a little bit. Let's talk about behavioral assessments. Now, you and I had a conversation about a year ago, and I took one with you, and the results were quite interesting, because there were certain areas where I was way over here in the top 95 percentile, and then way in the bottom 5 percentile in areas that were seemingly pretty close. So talk to me about your experience with behavioral assessments, what's your preferred one to go to, and so on.
Yeah, I have 2 that I really like, and one is a self-assessment and one is a 360. And it is a really interesting field. So there's somebody who said that the valid ones are not very popular and the popular ones are not very valid. And I think that's really, really accurate. There is the one that I think is really good is called the Hogan Assessment. And I don't have any association with them. I don't get anything from them. I do think that I've read Robert Hogan's written a lot of books, He and his wife are both psychologists. He taught at the University of Tulsa, I think, or Oklahoma for a period of time. So he's a personality psychologist, and that's a fairly new field. But he's kind of a Jungian in that he thinks that that we all have sort of archetypes, that we all fall into certain categories, and it's not a bad thing. And again, the thing is to know what they are. And there's a good question. I always think that, well, isn't a 360 just inherently better than a self-assessment? And the answer is, it depends. But the answer for me is no, in my experience, because I've seen 360s go awry, where you do a 360 with one group of people and this person comes up a certain way, and you do a 360 with another group of people, for the same person, and you get a different answer. And it depends on the context. It depends on their relationship with those people in the context. For example, the sales group versus the manufacturing group. That person will appear to be completely different to two different groups of people. Whereas a self-assessment stays stable over a period of time. One could say it's skewed, but read Hogan's work, and he will tell you that it's pretty good, it's pretty valid, and it measures your reputation. In other words, if you answer these questions in this way, you're likely to have this reputation. And they literally have millions of, responses of people who are in business, executives, not just off the street. So that to me makes a lot of sense. And so I like that. And the other thing I like about Hogan is that Hogan says what I believe, that you're not always one way. Like when I get up in the morning, especially Saturday morning, I have a cup of coffee, I go for a walk, I am pretty good. I'm in my good self, like I feel good. Now, Friday afternoon, I fly home from traveling, I'm tired, my car is out of gas. That's a different me. It's me, but it's a different me, and I'm going to behave in different ways. And Hogan accounts for that. They give you, with one assessment and a series of questions, they say, look, on your best days, you're going to be like this, and you're probably going to be like this on your worst days when you're challenged. And I think that's really useful because it's true for me. And it's not like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. It's kind of like, a scale. Like you're more this way, and then you become more this way. And it's pretty predictable. And again, it's really becoming aware, just driving awareness. If you know that about yourself, you get more aware. And then the 360 is called the Leadership Circle 360. Boy, I can't say enough about that, how I think that is really, really a great learning tool for an executive coach. And again, I don't work for these folks or anything, but I do think they're really good. And I'll just give you the basics of it because I happen to think the world of it, that essentially the leadership circle says that there's a fundamental tension in human beings. There's a tension between being sort of driven by possibility and the future, and being excited about something and going for it and being courageous. There's that tension. We all have that. But then we also have fear. What'll happen if I do that? So we're driven by these two forces. And that the circle, the leadership circle, has those two measures. So the top half is a sort of measure of your ability to reach out and to go for it and to be courageous, and the bottom half shows your propensity to be fearful and cover up and be cautious. And then anyway, I will. It's a very beautifully done, I think, model. There's a lot to it. You don't want to do a leadership circle until you've spent hours and hours really learning how to do it, because it's very detailed. But it teaches you a lot, just learning how to use the leadership circle, and I think it's worth it. And Yeah, I think it's a great tool.
I think one of the things that stuck out to me is the awareness. That is one of the biggest things that I've seen adds value to people, is because most of what they experience whenever they're reading through the output of the assessment, it's kind of a realization event of, oh, wow, yeah, that is me. Oh, wow, okay. And so there's value in the self-assessment piece of it, but then there's also a tremendous amount of value in the 360 piece. People kind of find out, hey, how are you perceived by others around you? Now, what I have also found interesting is that can be a little bit more difficult for people to read through and hear that feedback of how they are perceived by others. They get a little bit defensive and a little bit unsure. So how do you reconcile that? Whenever you're coaching somebody and you've got your 360 over here and you've got your self-assessment over here, what are those responses like in most of your clients? And then how do you kind of pull all of that together to formulate some sort of a plan or a move forward process?
Yeah. Oh, that's a big question, because that's really, that's coaching. But let me just say that I only coach people who want to get something done, some measurable result. So I use different methods, measures. I use objectives and key results. That's something that I think is really very, very, very useful. OKRs, if you're familiar with them, John Doerr. But that whole thing is just a way of measuring. So against the backdrop of doing something, going for something, like you hire a coach to say, I want to go to the Olympics. I want to win the gold. I want to make more money in my business. I want to finish a book. Whatever that is. So against that, people run up against roadblocks. And then when they run up against the roadblock, that's where the assessments come in. And you've got to learn to relate that assessment to where they're blocked. And a lot of the time, so to make it easy, a lot of times it's a relationship. So they'll say, well, I can't get this done because this son of a bitch, excuse me, this SOB is in the way, and blah. And then you're like, okay, hold on. Well, let's talk about the SOB for a couple minutes, because maybe that interruption there is part of why this is not getting done. And then you can use perhaps one of the Hogan it's called the dark side. So it's, the sort of negative when you are tired. There's an acronym that they use: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, the HALT acronym. So when you're one of those things, you're not going to be your best, and or you may not be your best, and then you behave in a certain and predictable way. And you got to sort of learn that. When you learn that, and the best way to learn it is to catch it in action. So you say, and this is tricky, but it's where you say, what we talked about it's called the HDS in Hogan. So we talk about the HDS and your sort of shortness of dealing with people on this particular issue. I'm struggling to give you a good example, but people know their weaknesses. So you say, look, you know how we talked about you lose patience in technical issues, right? Here, how do you see that playing out in this relationship right here? And do you see that? How do you see that playing out with respect to the goal, to respect to the outcome? And if they can connect those two, first of all, you probably have to undo this one. You have to undo just the relationship so they get disentangled from the relationship, so they're not emotionally kind of pissed off and upset about the relationship. And once you can do that, they can start to see, right, I did that again. I keep doing that. When I get angry, when I didn't realize I was hungry, but I was hungry then, and I went off on the guy and blah, blah, blah. And and it's really remarkable how relationships are the grease or they stop things. They either make things go or they stop things. And it's all a function of having great, honest relationships. And that's the hard part in some cases is really having people be straight with you and tell you the truth, tell you the badness and the bad thing and the good things. So, that's how you do it. You have a context. You're going for something. Something's in the way. How does the assessment help you?
I like the fact that you only coach people that want to get something done. Whenever I start having sessions with whomever it may be, especially if it's someone new that I haven't really worked with before, I find that I'm interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing me, because yes, you could pay me, but quite frankly, I don't want to take somebody's money if they don't have any interest in building and developing themselves. They have to have a very real conversation and acknowledge, hey, I need some guidance because there's things that I'm doing wrong. I need somebody that's going to be honest and work with me and help me overcome these. Not somebody that's just going to be a hoorah, go team in the background, but not actually have the deep conversations to address root challenges or root issues that are preventing you from moving forward. So I love that you take that approach. I think there's a lot to that. And, I can't say that I've seen a lot of coaches that take the other avenue where they just root for the team all the time. But for me, it seems more beneficial and just a waste of time if somebody's not actually going to put in the effort and have those real conversations with themselves.
Yeah. So, no, it's important. It's critical.
So let's talk a little bit about this past year. Earlier, you mentioned before we started recording how you kind of shifted your business model a little bit. So I want to talk about that.
Wow.
But then I also want to talk about fitness. I know that I've obviously been following you for a while, and I think you put in a home gym somewhere there in your house. So let's dive into both of those topics for a bit.
Sure. Well, the last year, so a lot of my friends, clients, business partners are all over the place. In Europe, I was doing coaching in the Middle East. That was something that was kind of something I love to do, but it's also where I could have a competitive advantage. I was uniquely, companies would hire me to help their expats blend into Saudi Arabia, or to blend in, or to be, to really do well in Dubai or Qatar or Abu Dhabi or wherever it was. And that was really cool, very exciting, fun. And I think I made a huge difference there because they needed to blend in. Blend in is not the right word. They needed to sort of feel comfortable there and become effective there. And similarly, in Europe, too. I was doing the same sort of thing in Europe. And my deal was I would get on an airplane and fly out. And I even convinced myself I like flying. And I did. I do. But so that all came to like an abrupt end. And I will tell you that the coaching, particularly a 12-hour different time zone, is nearly impossible. You can't, I don't think, it didn't work for me to just get on a 1-hour phone call with somebody at a 12-hour time difference and make a difference, and you do it once a month, or it just didn't work. It didn't work the same as sitting in front of somebody, spending a day, having dinner with them, having lunch. And so that all basically went away. And I still have great relationships, friendships, but we're not doing any coaching. It's mutually agreed. It just doesn't work. So I'm doing more and more and more coaching from here, coaching from my house. And I put together a video series. I spent the last year doing a video series because I think it's, first of all, there's just way too many people who have all this experience that they don't know how to translate that experience to become a coach. And there's so much nonsense out there in terms of books and things about don't use advice and don't give advice and coaching is coaching and you don't need to know the top. I read something recently that said, do you want to become a coach? And then it said, and now choose what you want to coach. I'm like, are you kidding me? You can't just choose what you want to coach. You got to know it. You can't just oh, let me think. I want to coach, knitting. I don't know.
Makeup.
I mean, it's just really that bizarre to me that industry is so, I don't know. It's so crazy that people really think they can do that. So my program is for men and women who are really experienced, want to use that experience to coach the next generation, whether that's inside of an organization, so they don't have to leave the organization, they stay inside. And I talk about the assessments, how to use them, doing examples of them. I talk about the OKR process, the objectives and the key results, and really go through the whole thing. And I'm betaing that with a bunch of people right now, and it's fun. It's fun because people, they get to just watch it over and over if they want, or write down questions, and so it's pretty cool. I'm enjoying it.
Well, I like that approach because it also gives you the opportunity to have a greater impact at scale.
Yeah.
Whenever you take everything that you've got up here, instead of having these one-on-one coaching sessions, which are highly impactful, no doubt, but once you are able to put it into some sort of a platform where you can reach more people and positively affect and help these coaches learn what they need to learn to be more successful as they start their coaching or build their coaching practice. So, I mean, I think that's the right approach. Eventually, it's something that I will probably get into, but right now I'm just more focused on the one-on-one, high impact, and then also just kind of learning my own coaching style. I've been doing it for just a few years now, and it's just, I'm still learning, and I myself am evolving and figuring out what works best for myself and my clients. But I think you're kind of at that next step where you can now put it into some sort of a platform. And I would love the opportunity to chat more with you about that and potentially beta it and try it out. So
you got it.
I definitely have to follow up with you on that. So,
and then let's talk about fitness, because I think that the fitness thing is the other thing that has saved my life. And I don't mean that, sort of melodramatically, but I think that, even 10 years ago, I was not in good shape. No, I was in bad shape. And I wasn't, if you looked at me, I was maybe 20 pounds heavier than I am now, sort of puffy. And, but I was taking medication to help me sleep, and I would say, well, you travel the way I travel, you'd have sleep. No, I was, drinking too much. I was eating poorly, at the wrong times. I didn't really understand how the body worked. I would eat late at night and then have a couple drinks and try to go to sleep, and that didn't work, so I take a sleep medication. That was really brilliant. And of course I have back issues, so take pain medication for my back, and it was just a mess. And I think it was just like slowly, your body really responds and says, thank you. You get a good night's sleep, you work out hard. I started walking when I moved to Charlottesville, so all I did was walk. I would walk 40 minutes, and Charlottesville is an awesome little place. So I'd walk around the university, and then I was living near there. And then I would start doing really light weights. I'd buy like 2 dumbbells, started doing that. And then now I've got a full gym. And again, it's not like at least for me, if you do it slowly and you build up to it, you work out, it is something that pays you back. So you can kind of like say, oh, good, I get to work out. It's sort of like, oh, shoot, I got to work out. But then, oh, it'll be good. It'll be good. It's kind of like you feel good when you walk out of there. You sleep well. You're not sort of enticed into having sweets or, some bad food. I don't know. It just really changed. It was one of these things where I'm convinced that I have terrible willpower, and, that never worked for me, willpower. But doing, like exercise and that sort of thing, it's the willpower comes with doing it, because when you do it, you feel good and you want to feel good, and it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I pretty much, it's built into my schedule and my life.
Yeah, I think the importance for me and what I've come to realize is that it's all about building those healthy habits.
Yeah.
And for me, it was very much so. It was probably about 10 years or so ago that I've always kind of exercised and ate relatively clean. But about 10 to maybe 12 years ago, I really started focusing a lot on understanding nutrition, the importance of sleep. I mean, that was something that I struggled with. I used to be real big into playing video games. I would stay up till 2 in the morning playing video games, then get up and go to work. Very, very unhealthy. And so you start learning those things and building these, what I'll refer to as self-reinforcing good habits. And I say self-reinforcing because once you get into the habit of doing it, you feel so good. And then when you don't do it, you just feel miserable.
That's the key. Exactly. That's almost the bigger key. I totally agree.
Yeah. So what is one of the most powerful lessons that you have learned throughout your journey?
Oh, boy. I think it is not to project. I would project the way I think things were going to go. I would make a decision and I would project, and then I would just freak out and make all kinds of decisions, and I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to do that. And I really learned to breathe through it and like just sort of trust that let's, get a good night's sleep. Let's think about it tomorrow and allow it to just sort of pass. And I think it is kind of like that one day at a time thing where you just say, look, it'll look differently tomorrow. And, I'm working on my second book, and two of the things that I think are just so important I keep coming back to are patience and courage. And courage is a tricky one but courage for me means not running. Like my thing was, I was in Saudi Arabia and I got to go somewhere. What's the next place to go? Go to Houston. Okay, great. What's the next place to go? Go to Paris. Okay, great. What's the next place? It's always going to be the grass is greener and and now I'm like, I have the patience to realize it's not about, that's not the solution. There's another way to look at that. That doesn't mean you rule out traveling and that sort of thing, but it's really allowing in the day, sort of living in the day and just sort of addressing what you've got right now and not projecting and predicting the future and figuring it all out, because you can't anyway. So I don't know if I answered the question.
Very much so, and I know exactly where you're coming from. It's something that I've struggled with at certain points. Well, if I'm being honest, the majority of my professional career, when I see something being done in a way that I don't think is, quote, right. And so I start thinking through, okay, how do I have this conversation with the right person? What do I need to say? And I start modeling out all these different scenarios and which way the conversation could go, and end up having many sleepless nights.
Yeah.
And in the end, none of it mattered. And I think back to a year ago or 2 years ago when I was struggling with it quite a bit. And I look back and all those sleepless nights, none of it mattered. The challenge that I was facing or the team was facing at that point in time, it's not even a blip on the radar. And so being able to understand the importance of patience and understanding, hey, we're just going to take this one day at a time. Yes, it's stressful. Yes, it's frustrating. Just one foot in front of the other. Or like your analogy earlier, just put one rock in the stream. Okay, let's step there. Okay, now let's find another one. Okay, just one step at a time. And patience has been something that I've struggled with, and I'm still struggle with a little bit, but I'm getting better at it. So,
no, I think that's part of this idea that the grass is always greener. That because I didn't have patience. When somebody presented me with the greener grass, I jumped on it. And it's really being able to say, and after, my age, I've jumped on a few bad things, right? So I'm like, damn it, I'm not going to do that anymore. And patience, you learn it, and you're like, I already tried that one, man. Not gonna do that.
All right. Well, Bruce, we'll go ahead and start wrapping this up. Do you have any final words that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I think that I went through a challenging time in my 50s and now in my 60s, and it can be really stressful. I mean, I think for me, I want to just share that I've been a loner most of my life, if not all of my life, and but I do think now I'm connecting with more people who, like me, are seeing, you know what? These could be really great years. This is like, I've got my health, I've got a little money in the bank, I certainly know how to, I know my career, and I think I could be a really good coach. It is I think a really wonderful time, and it's not easy because the rest of the world looks at us like, you're now 60 and it's there. And when we also look at ourselves, you think back when I was in my 30s and 40s and thinking, what am I going to be like in my 60s? And you got to really sort of challenge that, because we are going to live into our 90s and beyond in a very, very healthy way, and we could have a really great life and make a big difference, and I think that if that's something that interests people, that I would love to be part of that. I don't know how and when, but I think that's really a possibility that going forward, that there's a resurgence, that there was books written about my generation, the baby boomers, that weren't very flattering, and I don't disagree with them in some ways. We weren't always the best, but we can now make a difference and give back and contribute. There's some real challenges out there, and I think we can be some of us can really make a difference and do something good. So,
yeah. So what's the best way for people to contact you or learn more about you and all the things that you're doing?
So the best way, I guess, is my website, which is brucerdorey.com, or my email, which is bruce@brdorey.com, or buy my book. Got all the info.
Yep. For all of you listening, again, the book is called Lift, The Nature and Craft of Coaching. Bruce, I have loved this book. I've actually gone through and read little bits and pieces of it from time to time after I read through the whole thing a year ago. And so I found this to be extremely beneficial. So for all of you that are kind of at that point in your life and career where you want to learn how to have a greater impact on those around you, I would highly encourage you to go check out this book. It's available on Amazon. I'm sure kind of anywhere. You just Google it and can definitely find it. Bruce, thank you so much. This was an incredible conversation. I am so glad that we had the opportunity to finally sync up and do this.
Yeah, for me too, Sean. Thank you very much. This was great.
All right. Okay, for the rest of you, thank you so much for tuning in and watching the show on YouTube or listening to the podcast. I can't thank all of you enough. Y'all have a good one.